Hey, how's it going? Parker Welbeck here with FullTimeFilmmaker.com, and today I'm joined by my assistant Jacob Weisler, who took my online course just a couple years ago, and within just 3 months he was able to quit his day job and go full-time as a wedding videographer. And today he makes over 6 figures a year, booking high-end destination weddings all over the world. So since he's been killing it in the wedding industry, today he's going to be helping me reveal our top 10 tips to shooting cinematic wedding videos. Tip number 1 is buying the right gear. Jake, what do you recommend the good people buy for shooting weddings?
Well, first off, we want to emphasize that the brand of camera you buy isn't nearly as important as learning how to use whatever you have to its fullest potential. But that having been said, here are our recommendations. For those just starting out, we want to talk about the 4 basic pieces of equipment you should be using as a one-man camera crew: a camera body, a lens, a stabilizer, and a microphone. For a camera, our needs are pretty simple. We want a camera that can shoot at least 60 frames per second in at least 1080p. 60 FPS allows for beautiful slow motion, and for Parker and I's style, we love that slow and dreamy look for our wedding films. We also want a camera that has great autofocus. It makes our lives so much easier. And lastly, we look for cameras with great colors. For Parker and I, we prefer to get our colors as beautiful as we can straight out of camera. We then like to enhance and grade the colors to match our own personal styles. Parker and I both shoot on the Canon 1DX Mark II, which can shoot 4K at 60 frames per second, has great autofocus, and also awesome in-camera colors. I've also used the 5D Mark IV, which can shoot 1080 at 60 FPS, and the Sony a7 III, which does the same. Sony is going to do better in low light, but in our opinion, not as well with colors. So just pros and cons to each camera. For us personally, 4K at 60 is a game changer, so the 1DX is our weapon of choice.
Now, obviously that is a bit pricey for most, but we do recommend investing in professional gear. So the cheapest we'd recommend going is something like the Canon 80D or Sony a6500, which will run you about $1,000. My very first wedding that I shot was on the Canon T3i, but could only shoot 720 at 60 frames per second and was super soft, so I'd recommend investing in something nicer than that if you want to take weddings seriously. As for lenses, if you can only have one lens, I'd recommend getting the 24-70, or if you're on an APS-C camera, then something like a Sigma 17-55. On a full frame camera though, the 24-70 is my go-to all-purpose lens that allows you to get great shots wide open for big groups and establishing locations, but also zooms in for tighter shots to focus in on faces and other details. I'd say 80% of my footage for weddings comes from this lens, and you can definitely get by with just this one lens at a wedding. And if you're going to pick up a second lens, I'd probably get something like a 50mm 1.4 so that you can have a lens that shoots better in low light and allows for that extra shallow depth of field. Jake's primary lens that he uses for most of his wedding footage is either the Canon 50mm 1.2 or the Canon 35mm 1.4. As for stabilizers, Jake and I both love and use the GlideCam. The GlideCam HD Pro series is probably the best one we recommend getting right now. As for motorized gimbals, we've tested out quite a few, but our favorite for weddings would have to be the Ronin S. It's easy to balance, easy to learn, and much easier to get smooth shots straight out of the box than a GlideCam. Again, we still both agree that GlideCam looks more natural and it is more versatile, so we do use that over a motorized gimbal, but the GlideCam does take a lot more practice to get good. And inside the course, we show you how to master the GlideCam and give you our favorite settings for using the Ronin S. And smooth footage is going to separate you from most of the amateurs out there, so investing in a good stabilizer and learning how to use it is very important.
And for microphones, my favorite microphone to capture audio at weddings is the Tascam DR10L Lav mic. These things are so small and they come in black and white. They're super easy to put on and basically invisible. There's obviously other accessories you'll want to pick up, like ND filters, maybe some lights for the reception venue, camera bags, memory cards, hard drives, but we won't go into too much detail on all the knickknacks in this video. You can visit our kit pages, links in the description, to see a full list of all of our camera recommendations. Moving on to our second tip to shooting weddings is to plan ahead. Set expectations. I see so many horror stories of clients getting upset at their videographers and vice versa, and all of those issues could have been resolved if they would have just communicated.
When a bride is interested in booking your services, it's so important to make sure you're both on the same page about what to expect on that big day. They should know when you'll be there, what the final product will look like, how long it's going to take for you to edit it, what you will and won't be shooting during the day, and so on. Talk to your clients, be personable. They're not just hiring you for a video, they are hiring you to spend their whole wedding day with them. They want to know and be assured that you're going to be a pleasure to work with. They don't want to stress the whole day about whether you're going to do your job correctly and or being bugged about how intrusive or passive you are. Some brides will want you to be in the action, getting as close up as you can and everything, and others will want you to be on the outskirts and invisible. You have to communicate these things beforehand. Ask if they have any special requests or details they want to make sure in the video. Some weddings involve very sentimental details, and only the family knows what they are. Great communication ensures that those details, however small or big, make it in the final edit.
On the topic of communication, this also applies to working with a photographer. Communicate with them. I've worked with countless photographers, some with great personalities and others with not so great personalities, but I've never had any issues working with one. Why? Because I communicate. When you arrive at the wedding, find the photographer, introduce yourself, and then talk about the schedule for the day. Discuss where you want to be to capture important shots, like the bride walking down the aisle, the first kiss, etc. Discuss where you both can be without being in each other's way. This gets you on the same page and ensures that neither of you will butt into the other's shot. And if you become great friends with the photographer, then they'll start sending you client referrals. But they definitely won't send work your way if you're a pain to work with. So plan ahead, set expectations, and be a pleasure to work with.
Tip number 3 is choosing the best focal lengths. Your job is to make the bride and groom look as attractive as possible. A lot of that depends on what focal length you use. A huge sign of an amateur videographer is one who puts a wide angle close up to the bride's face. The most flattering focal length for the human face has been said to be between 70 and 100 millimeter. For example, take a look at my buddy Tanner here. Look how distorted his face looks at 24 millimeter versus how natural it looks at 70 millimeter. So the only time I use 24 millimeter is for group shots where I'm trying to fit a lot of things into the frame. And then I zoom into 70 millimeter when I'm going tight on the couple's faces. Wide angle lenses are for wide shots and tighter focal lengths are for faces, people, and details.
Tip number 4 is to create depth. When I see a detail that I like or I'm posing my couple, I look for opportunities to create depth, meaning I want something as foreground to my subject and something in the background of my subject. This creates depth in my image by creating layers and making the scene feel more three-dimensional, thus making my subject pop off the screen and come to life. Another great way to create depth is to look for leading lines, like in fences or pillars or pathways. Anything that makes your image feel like it has depth will turn a not so cinematic image into something beautiful.
Tip number 5 is to capture the details. The couple spent a ton of money on details for their wedding. The flowers, the cake, the tables, the chairs, the bride's dress, the groom's outfit, the venue as a whole, the lights, the decor hanging around. Everything was handpicked by the bride to be at that wedding. So film all of it. Details are also a great thing to help set the mood of the final video. They can be used to transition between scenes or set the tone of the whole film and carry the aesthetic. Details are also great B-roll to put over top of people talking, so make sure to capture more than you think you're going to need for your edit. And in order to have time to film all of those details, make sure to show up about an hour early to the venue so you have plenty of time to capture as much as you need without people walking in and out of your shots. Tip number 6 is lighting. Wedding ceremonies typically are lit pretty well, and there's usually not much you can do to change the lighting, so you just have to do the best you can with the lighting situations that you're given and document everything as it plays out. But receptions typically are not lit very well. They're usually in the evening when the sun goes down, and the mood is supposed to be intimate and dark, which usually means very low lighting. And even with a low aperture lens and a great low light camera, sometimes the venue is just too dark to shoot. And if you bump up your ISO too much, your image will just start to fall apart. In some situations, that may be all you can do, but where possible, we recommend setting up some of your own lighting.
Lighting up a reception is a game changer. You'll not only be able to make your subject more visible, but you'll turn the whole scene into a much more cinematic image, and the photographers will probably love you. I didn't invest in lights the first year of my business, and I have many regrets. I personally love and use the Core SWX Torch LED lights. I bought 3 of these things and I couldn't be happier with the results. They can mount right to your camera or to a light stand. They're bright, dimmable, and bicolored.
And when you're lighting up a scene, ideally you'll have at least 2 lights, one light as your key light to light up the front of your subject and another light as the back light to make sure your subject doesn't disappear into the background. And having bicolored lights is important as well, as it gives you the freedom to match your light temperature with the temperature of the venue lights. It would look horrible if your lights were cool and blue while the reception lights were orange and warm. So where possible, set up some artificial lights and match the color temperature to blend in with the venue.
Tip number 7 is called right place, right time. Weddings are busy, and there are so many things happening at once. And the last thing you want to do is miss a moment that only happens once. So whenever someone DMs me and asks, hey, any advice on my first wedding? My answer is always be in the right place at the right time. Know where to be for when the bride is getting ready, which is at her side. Know where to be when she walks down the aisle, when they exchange rings, when they exchange vows. Know where to be when they cut the cake, toss the bouquet, make their grand exit, and so on. Weddings are full of moments that happen once that you can't redo. Plan out where to be and when. Knowing where to be takes time and it takes learning. If you're very inexperienced, we have several virtual job shadows in the course to show you where we choose to be in different scenarios to help give you the confidence to know where you should be when you shoot your weddings. But the best way to learn is to do it yourself and learn as you go. For example, when the bride is about to walk down the aisle, the right place to be at that time is at the front of the ceremony, shooting down the aisle. If you're off to the side or maybe even behind her, you're in the wrong place and you're missing the best angle. No one wants to see the back of her head. They want to see her face. They also want to see the groom's reaction. So you'll want to make sure once you've got a great shot of the bride to turn around and grab a quick reaction shot of the groom. But you can't capture both of their faces unless you're in the right place at the right time. When in doubt about where you should be, the safest thing to do is to just follow the bride. Nothing important ever happens at the wedding without the bride. So don't lose her, and you shouldn't miss out on anything too important.
Tip number 8 is audio. As I always say, audio is half of the viewing experience. Good music choice, sound effects, dialogue can all enhance the video and help the story come to life and be more meaningful in an emotional way. On the other hand, horribly captured audio can ruin a beautiful image. Or if no audio is captured at all, the video will end up feeling a little bit empty. Admittedly, I've done plenty of wedding highlight films with no talking, just visuals set to music. And that can work, but when you compare that to the times when I've included vows or toasts or speeches to go over top of the visuals, it can take the video to a whole new level. So where possible, try and capture some sentimental dialogue. Now, we've already talked about audio gear to use to capture audio, but it's important to have the right equipment with you to be able to lob the bride and the groom and whoever else will be saying anything important. Also, for ceremonies, I recommend having an audio recorder that you can plug into the DJ's audio box to capture audio as it was captured coming into the microphones, which is a great backup option if you don't have time to lob anyone. A great affordable audio recorder that we recommend is the Zoom H1, which auto-adjusts the gain levels to ensure that your audio levels never peak. And we show in the virtual job shadow videos how to effectively set all of this up. But the best, most effective way to capture audio that we recommend is through lobbing the couple. Lobbing the groom is pretty easy. There's a lot of ways you can do it. Our favorite way is to stick the lav mic under the groom's chest on either side of where the tie hangs. We use Rycoat stickies, or you can use gaff tape to stick it right to his chest. We then weave the lav cord down through his shirt and out the back to plug into the Tascam, which is clipped to his belt. Now, lobbing the bride is a bit trickier and depends on the dress, so we cover this in more detail on how to do this with ease and comfort inside the full course.
Tip number 9 is posing couples. There's nothing worse than watching a wedding video of an emotionless, frozen couple. Newsflash, they aren't actors. They aren't going to look natural and comfortable all the time unless you help them feel natural and comfortable. A lot of times, it's even up to you to get them to express any emotion. Some couples might be great at doing that naturally, but other times they don't feel comfortable with cameras on them, so you need to learn some skills to help them out. Posing a couple is actually a lot easier than you think. There are 3 things to shoot for when posing: depth, movement, and emotion. So when I pose my couples, my first priority is emotion. I like to have them hold each other close, do something that will make them laugh or smile genuinely. Sometimes I'll have the groom whisper in the bride's ear or hug her very tight from behind, or maybe as I'm directing them, I'll just say funny jokes or comment on how great they look, which brings out great emotion and genuine smiles. The point is to help them feel comfortable. Second priority is movement. I'm obsessed with movement. Parker and I's style both revolves around movement. Most of my shots end up with my couple just walking together or running through a field. I call it the drunk walk. I'll have my couple walk towards the camera and bump into each other every few steps like they're drunk. One way that Parker created movement in a shot was to shake the branches of a tree so that the flower petals fell from the tree as they walked through them. Or waiting for a wind gust to create movement in the bride's veil. Look for every opportunity to create movement. And lastly, depth. A few of my favorite poses involve using either the bride or groom as foreground to the other. A few examples: I'll ask the bride or the groom to lead the other and use the leader as foreground. I'll tell the bride or groom as they walk to look up and smile at each other every few steps, and then look down at their feet every few other. I'll have them start running and shoot it from a few different angles. Another pose I love is when I have the bride wrap her arms around the groom's neck while holding her bouquet. I'll shoot from behind the groom to focus on the bride's face, using the flowers as foreground. I'll have the couple look into each other's eyes, smile and laugh, or just be still. It's a beautiful shot. And another pose I love is to have the bride and the groom holding each other belly to belly while I brush past the tree or leaves or wall or whatever I can to reveal them. The depth adds some great emotion to the image.
Ultimately, it's your job to make them look good. Have them hug, have them kiss, have them walk, twirl, cuddle, laugh. Look up some poses beforehand and have a written list or a list in your head of all the different poses you want to try out throughout the day. Get creative with it and do your best to make them feel natural and comfortable on camera. And moving on to our last and final tip is to be confident. There's nothing worse than a videographer who obviously has no idea what's going on. Imagine being a bride, paying a ton of money to someone to capture the most important day of your life, and you see your videographer show up with zero confidence, zero direction, and looking around like a lost puppy.
Fake it till you make it. Even if it's just your first wedding, just accept it's your first wedding and then get over it. Film everything. Make everything look pretty. Capture the bride, capture the emotion. Laugh and joke with the couple and do it with confidence. Confidence is what makes brides want to refer you to their friends. Confidence is what will attract engaged couples attending the wedding and lead them to hire you. And you don't need to be a bubbly person to be confident either. You can have quiet confidence, but you need to have confidence.
So there you have it, guys. Those are our top 10 tips for shooting weddings. Obviously, we're just skimming the surface here. We could go way more in depth on each of these subjects and sit here and talk for days, but wedding videography is an individualized thing that evolves the more you learn and practice. But that's it, folks. Hope this was helpful. And if you have any further questions, please let us know.